Today we have Wolfman issue 10, and there is a killer loose in the forest, and Sabreclaw is his name, as depicted by this typically poor quality Bill son of a bitch art piece that is on the cover. It is one of his better covers, and it is still a hot mess. And not only because there is a bit of damage on my copy from where a price tag was ripped off by somebody. Not me. This is written by Christopher Claremont. It is his last issue on Wolfman until 100 issues time when he jumps back on, because Christopher Claremont won't leave anything alone or let things grow beyond his own limited scope and tone-deaf ideas. Art is by Sal Buscema. That is John Buscema's brother. And it is totally ruined by the inking of Bill son of a bitch. Something I do not understand is the industry's belief that Bill son of a bitch is any good, for starters, but also that they continued to get him to ink pencilers who he very much destroys. They would always have him ink artists with very clean line work, and all Bill son of a bitch as an inker does is make everything dark and drab and murky. It's fucking unacceptable. They kept having him ink both the Buscemas. He makes them look like amateurs, especially on Spectator Spider-Man, which convinced me for a while that one of the Buscemas was actually terrible. They had him ink Ron French, Mary Whitehouse, Butcher Jackson, and he makes everyone look as shit at art as he is. I am only talking about him inking here. I am not getting into that issue of New Thunderballs they got him to do art for. Again though, they think he is normal. They think this fraud, pretending to be an alternative outsider artist, just slots in between issues drawn by Wallace Gromit. I don't like Christopher Claremont either, and I noticed the colours of this issue were provided by someone I made cry. Highlight of the issue is on this page where it says it is starring Wolverine. I think someone thought the knife and the hand and the floorboard, they would look a lot more like a W when they imagined this page in their heads. This issue hands us some backstory that is retconned in 40 issues time, with Wolfman's Native American lady friend being killed by Sabreclaw. This issue establishes, or is meant to establish, the foundational underpinnings of their animosity. This is their hitherto unseen history. As I said, this is heavily retconned in issues 48, 49 and 50 of this series. And even Christopher Claremont himself intended to reveal more beyond this, which sounds dreadful to me. We keep jumping back between the present and the past to fill in details. I will say some people a lot of people consider this an important milestone issue in Wolfman history. But to be honest, it is not much of a story. It is a bit of a trick, really. What you have here is a story that in and of itself is not of any consequence, but it suggests that it is massively consequential in what it reveals. In the past, we see Wolfman and Sabreclaw feuding, and I will talk about Sabreclaw for a bit. I'll give you a primer on Sabreclaw, because I like Sabreclaw and think Sabreclaw is better than Wolfman. Sabreclaw was created by Christopher Clairvoyant and Jason Byrne as an enemy for Iron Fist. He barely made a ripple in the Marvel Universe with that debut, but Christopher Clairvoyant has a tendency to never let anything go, and so he was farmed out to Miss Marbles, Karen Daggers, before they ruined her by making her into Smelly Brie Larson's, in what was actually an unpublished issue of her solo series. It was eventually printed in the 90s in Marvel Superheroes, combined with a second supposed unprinted issue that is pure revisionist history and pretending that Christopher Clairvoyant always had these intense, heavily orchestrated plans. With other writers, Sabreclaw appeared a few more times fighting Iron Fist and Luke Cage's. But one of my favourite ones, though, is when he is in Spectator Spider-Man and Felicity absolutely kicks his arse. It really hammers home how rubbish Wolfman must be to have a woman with next to no powers best Sabreclaw in a purely physical fight. Eventually, Christopher Clairvoyant decided to bring Sabreclaw into the Excellent Men books during Muti Mascara, and it was here where he, by accident, realised that Sabreclaw was a perfect nemesis for Wolfman. I don't disagree with the notion, but when Christopher Clairvoyant hits on something, he pretends he had it in mind all along and starts trying to establish bullshit retcons and nonsensical unnecessary history to make it appear to have greater meaning. Really, all you needed to do was keep having Wolfman fight Sabreclaw, which he does do. But Christopher Clairvoyant will always insist on them having some major shared history that explains why they hate each other. They hate each other so much that both characters appeared for a decade without ever thinking about each other. Why would Sabreclaw be wasting his time on Iron Fist when he supposedly has a deep-rooted hatred for Wolfman? Anyway, that brings us to where we are at now. Although there probably was some classical Excellent Men backup story that suggested what we have here first. That's another thing with Christopher Clairvoyant. He will show stuff in random classical Excellent Men backup stories or Marvel Funfair or whatever, and he will expect everyone to be reading everything with his name on. So then he can have Storm's pull out a magic necklace in Uncanny Excellent Men Annual 12, and it turns out she is queen of a dimension that is ripped off from Neverending Story. And if you didn't read that one issue of Classical Excellent Men which detailed this part of her character, then it is your fault. That annual was actually when I realised that I didn't just not care for Christopher Clairvoyant's writing, I absolutely hated it. The idea that Storms can just pull out this random bullshit from this really specific story that nobody read, and the entire plot comes crashing to a halt to just focus on that. I don't mind this part. Wolfman, he stops a mugging or a raping. Something you should be able to tell the difference between, really. But I don't mind the script of this too much. This issue, in my opinion, Bill son of a bitch's inking is what is making this very bad. I would have loved to see someone else ink this. Someone like Green Man. He was inking Uncanny Excellent Men at the time, and the art on that was a high point for comic book art. A sticking point for me is, this is the page to throw it out there, the lack of backgrounds. It is as much a criticism of Sal Buscema, brother of John Buscema, but it is a fucking common thing whenever Bill son of a bitch is involved. When he was doing full art on New Muties, he would nearly always not have backgrounds. Then, in instances, whenever he was given creative freedom, it would be an excuse for him to do less. He gets to draw the astral train, a limitless vista where he should by rights be including all his weirdo alternative artist ideas. But no, solid pink backgrounds. Nothing trippy here. That'll be it for Bill son of a bitch in this video. I have said enough that is relevant to this issue, and I have other videos where I have broken down how incompetent or phony he is. Our flashbacks are Wolfman and Sabreclaw fighting in what began as a bar, then carried over outside, and then on this page wound up in a void of nothingness. What I like about Sabreclaw as a character is that there's no pretense with him. Nobody but Christopher Clairvoyant thinks he is, or should be, a deep character. He isn't meant to have that many different shades to him. He is best as an extremity. He is a remorseless monster, completely irredeemable and unlikable. That should be enough to make him Wolfman's or any hero's enemy. But of course, Christopher Clairvoyant thinks everything needs an explanation, and it needs to be convoluted, and everyone in the universe has to be linked somehow. And in this, his final issue on Wolfman, he still feels the need to try and make it a matter of fact that any subsequent writers must include his supporting cast, which include more toys that he won't put down. The original Spider-Girl here. And then back to the Sabreclaw flashbacks. I normally like to cover my history with a character because in the case of Sabreclaw, most people already know that he was an Iron Fist bad guy. He is a very big, major character. Most of you know his history. But what you don't know is my history with him. I would have been introduced to him in the 90s cartoon Excellent Men, the animated series. I can't remember if I liked him when I was a kid. I think I probably did, because he was a bad guy with claws and shit. When it comes to the comics, I had a very good first experience with Sabreclaw. It was an issue of Van Morrison's Excellent Men, which offered what remains the freshest take on the Wolfman and Sabreclaw rivalry. They bicker when they are having wheeze in the Bondage Club's toilets. After that, I think it was a few years later when Rouge, she had her own Excellent Men team. He was a member of that, but somewhat against his will. Happened to be drawn by the same artist as the Van Morrison issue. Then, of course, there is Age of Armageddon, and there is X-Cells, and his first mini-series, and a variety of other comics that I have read. In the past, Sabreclaw is hunting down Wolfman, and this starts to be interspersed with really boring world building in the present. Christopher Clairvoyant has said several times that he didn't ever want Wolfman to have his own series. He didn't want Wolfman to have a solo title. So in this, he was trying to make people not want to read Wolfman's solo adventures. Even in the first Wolfman miniseries, he let Hank Miller include all the ninjas because he thought readers would not like that. Then with this one, he made Wolfman a pirate, and it was all because Christopher Clairvoyant didn't ever want a character to leave his complete control. He was trying to sink Wolfman. He reckoned if Marvel saw that Christopher Clairvoyant can't sell a Wolfman comic, then surely nobody else ever could. Except Wolfman fans are moronic sheep and will buy into anything, even if it is a completely pointless distraction filled to the brim with princesses and saloons and characters that Christopher Clairvoyant still won't let go, like Spider-Girl. When most people think of this issue, they are remembering the flashback, Wolfman and Sabreclaw. They are not fondly reminiscing about the tedious political unintrigue of Madripoor. They are remembering the plot beat and the haunting reveal that it is Wolfman's birthday, and Sabreclaw did all of this because of that, and Sabreclaw does it every year. That is a nice way to write up Sabreclaw and give him and Wolfman a serious history, but I will immediately shit on that by letting you know that Christopher Clairvoyant also wanted Sabreclaw to be Wolfman's dad. That would be fucking awful. The other thing is the idea that Sabreclaw hunts Wolfman down every year or inflicts some tragedy onto him every year. Now, other stories have made reference to this lore. It's a nice premise, but there's not really any other example of it. The notion is that Sabreclaw has done this every year, be it beaten Wolfman severely like in this, or him murdering Wolfman's close friends. But there isn't any other example of that. Years go by and we never see Wolfman suffer at the hands of Sabreclaw, especially on his birthday. In fact, and this is due to bad writers more than anything else, we have actually seen Wolfman defeat Sabreclaw with ease. And then nobody important to Wolfman has been killed by Sabreclaw on his birthday. Not even the one in this, which was retconned into not being killed by Sabreclaw. Now, I'm sure Christopher Clairvoyant is sitting on a retcon that Dark Phoenix was on Wolfman's birthday, and it was actually Sabreclaw who convinced her to sacrifice herself. That is what he would do nowadays, but I don't think Christopher Clairvoyant's idea presented in this issue is appalling. It just ultimately means nothing, and it is more than likely only a stepping stone for Christopher Clairvoyant to try and enforce his idea that they are father and son, which is as shit as Sinestro being an 11-year-old bully, or Sinestro being Ed Gambit, or Sinestro being Steelman from the future, all of which were ideas Christopher Clairvoyant wanted to do. The stuff in the present ends up only meekly tying into the flashbacks. Sabreclaw appears off-panel in them. He killed some guys who were ganning to kill Wolfman, because nobody kills you but me, especially today. And then Wolfman, he has a lame response that he says aloud, and nobody is there to hear it. Most people would recommend this issue and rave about its importance in the grand scheme of Wolfman's backstory. Me, on the other hand, I don't recommend it, and I don't think it is even that important to Wolfman as a character. As with most of Christopher Clairvoyant's comics, you are just watching him throw paint at a wall and seeing what sticks. Then you have the art, which has been made worse by an inker who was always paid with pencilers he had no reason to be put with. It is very close to being torn up, to tell you the truth, but that little bit of quality is shining through and saving it. The idea, which, removed from the context of subsequent stories or even the rest of this issue, the idea which is objectively good or acceptable. That is why it is not ripped into shreds right now, and I am giving it 7 thumbs up.